I'm Walter Yaner. I'm a soil microbiologist. I used to work with CSIRO and then in government innovation, but now I'm working with Healthy Soils Australia, which is a little NGO working with farmers on innovating, really interesting, leading soil restoration ecologies and farming practices.
Now, Walter, the reason we're having a chat, the main reason having a chat, I was absolutely fascinated by this article in the Weekly Times. It's by an organic farmer called Bruce Maynard, who we both know.
Yes.
And he's growing saltbush, and he has 80% of his saltbush dying.
Yes.
So the report says. And he's going to introduce another 12 or so species for them to die. I get suspicious by the fact that he's planted a particular type of saltbush that is susceptible to a disease, and I'm also suspicious that he may not have the soil diversity in the soil, and there's something wrong. Being an organic farmer, how would you assume what could be going wrong, and how could he fix the situation?
Yeah, Hugo, well look, it's of course very important but very difficult at a distance. So first of all, of course, you have to go look at the plantings, look at what Bruce has done, and then just look at the actual plants and how they're responding, what are the symptoms, what are the diseases, and really diagnose that situation. But let's go and look at the principles behind the situation,
yes.
And then see what the leads might be in understanding the cause of this problem. Now, Bruce has been a leader in Australia and globally and taking a very innovative position in trying to re-establish saltbush. Now, saltbush is this amazing plant that can grow in arid zone, saline areas, and it's extremely nutritious, perennial sort of ground cover. It was terribly important in maintaining that stable ecology in that arid area. So his leading role in trying to re-establish this to protect those desert areas from further desertification was really outstanding. And of course, to do that, what Bruce did, he then sort of said, okay, what saltbushes have we got? There's quite a range of species. And then he, of course, started replanting saltbushes in affected areas with some success. He was a leader in that. But now we've got this tragedy of, yes, some of those plantings dying, and we've got to look through, well, what could be causing it, and also how do we go forward? Because what we mustn't do is abandon or lose, that initiative. And two things happen. First of all, if you grow a plant in a nursery as a seedling and then transplant that out, we know that it's a completely different type of plant than those plants that have regenerated naturally in that soil. And that might be particularly so for saltbush because it's getting that deep tap root down into the soil from that very early seedling stage that might be very critical for that plant to survive. And secondly, there may be stress conditions in terms of the planting and the way they've established, and so these plants are now more vulnerable to diseases that would otherwise, be balanced or negated by the natural microbial ecology in those soils. So we've had the situation, have we got weakened plants because, obviously they've had to be planted, and are those plants more vulnerable to these diseases because of that? Alternatively, we've got to ask the question, could those diseases be a bit more rampant under those conditions because there's some aspect of the management, of that saltbush which has happened? We don't know that, but that's where we have to sit down and do that, investigation. So it definitely would seem from the evidence that we've got that, there's something in that soil microbial environment which is favouring the disease vis-a-vis the saltbush, but we know that the saltbush naturally survived and prospered and was able to counteract these diseases under natural conditions.
Well, a friend of ours got the same problem, and he's 40 kilometres west of Rochester, central Victoria, and he's got the old man saltbush, and he grew them in little speedling cubes, and I could well imagine those little speedling cubes wouldn't run a taproot, So maybe a saltbush, if in the future, should be
Right.
direct planted
Right.
rather than from species.
Yes, yes, and in a sense we've done a lot of that sort of work, right? Now, we have tried to regenerate saltbush naturally from seed. I mean, we can collect a lot of saltbush seed, but it's not that easy because saltbush seed has got a layer around that which prevents the seed from germinating, and really it's a very difficult germination process. So if we just spread that seed around, there's a real major dormancy, inhibition of germination. So that was a big challenge. How do we germinate saltbush seed if we just, direct seed it? And that's why they've gone to raising it in nurseries. And yeah, look, but these are the sort of things we have to solve. Is it the planting technique that has made these plants more vulnerable? At what size of seedling can you transplant them without that root condition inhibiting the plant in its older age or as it grows? And there's a whole lot of questions. And of course, we've got to then understand that site differences are also profoundly important. Like on one soil, in one sort of conditions, it might be a different survival response. So we've got to now ask the question, okay, yes, Bruce is having this dieback, but all people who've planted saltbush is having an equivalent problem. And then we have to look at what we call the epidemiology of that. And then we say, okay, under what condition is that disease most prevalent? And then we can understand what are the perhaps causal factors. So it's really a detective work on problem solving. Okay, saltbush dieback, what's contributing to it? How could we have aggravated that? What do we change to give it a better survival prospect?
Could there be a simple process of gathering material from naturally healthy growing saltbush that's grown naturally, and multiplying that material and spraying it out?
Okay, well, it's perhaps even simpler than that. If it is a thing that, most plants, 99% of plants in nature particularly, they don't just exist as plants, they exist in association with their natural soil, fungi and bacteria and actinomycetes, a whole gamut, suite of different microorganisms. And more we're understanding that plants don't exist alone, they exist as a community with these fundamental symbiotic relationships. And it's often the case of, if we're planting saltbush in some site, if we can bring these natural organisms from, healthy natural saltbush areas into that regeneration site, we may be adding the right organisms and the right conditions. And again, that's the sort of question that's very important. And we can ask that question, okay, do these seedlings in saltbush areas survive better than in artificially regenerated areas?
Do you think, like someone who's lost about 80% of this, the Rochester person who's lost about 80% of his thing, could he go out there and spray something like a remedial spray like seaweed, which is sort of known to do some marvellous things in the soil, or some rescue type of product on the leaf or on the soil?
Well, Hugo, I mean, it's yes, as you're saying, they're rescue trial and error things, and if you wish you could try that. And yes, you may be successful, but often once something has got so stressed and so diseased, then it's very hard to come back to recovery. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be actually saying, okay, let's plant some more seedlings under these different conditions and look, can they come back? So it's not just can I rescue those existing plants if they're very stressed already, but certainly you should keep on saying, okay, can I replant, with these different conditions, and what's my replant survival?
And the interesting thing is what Bruce Maynard is going to do. He's selecting, I think it was 12 different things that he's trying. So he's not going to go for the so-called one product that was specially bred for its performance.
Well, look, certainly, I agree, there's a range, and yes, of course, I think you have to start off, here's a cocktail, here's a range of things, and then you say, okay, what's working, what's not working, and then you can perhaps say, okay, can I winnow down to see what's the most effective? But certainly it's worth trying. But what I'm saying is just, I mean, like we're here not on site, but it's actually sitting down with all those experienced people, workshopping it, and then saying, okay, what is it that could be causing, what do we know, what are the symptoms, how do we problem solve, diagnose, and then how do we define what are perhaps the optimal trials. I think there's another thing we have to bring on board. Obviously, old man saltbush, Atroprax numerella, survives for hundreds of years in nature, but all plants, all living things do die. And so, in a sense, are there conditions that we have created which are, is more stressful and so forth. So I don't think it's the death of a plant or even 80% of the plant. It's sad, but it's not the end of the day. But it's learning the ecology, and every step is actually building knowledge, building awareness. And as long as we keep on learning, we're ahead of the game, right?
Fantastic. Would you like, what note would you like to end on?
Well, I think the thing is, I think we should go back to the beginning and really really congratulate Bruce for actually being that leader. And the point is, Bruce, you're learning, we're learning because of your leadership. And learning is the actual game here. And we learn just as much out of yes, this didn't work or didn't work quite like the way we wanted it. But as long as we keep on learning, you're pioneering a really, really valuable thing, not just for Australia, but globally, because we've got 5 billion hectares of desertified, salinised, degraded land on this planet. And that saltbush and your innovation is a key part to our future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Walter.
Yeah, no problems.